President Truman receives an award from the Society of Business Magazines in Washington. In an impromptu speech, he echoes the sentiments of every free man concerning dictators.
We're fighting for freedom, for the right to worship as we please in any church we choose to attend, the right to read what we please, and the right to speak what we please, and the right to elect public officials of our own choosing, and then to give them hell after they're elected. Dictators don't believe that. And there's no difference between dictators. If you study your history, there hasn't been any difference in any police state that ever existed in the history of the world. They're all alike. They're all for the enslavement of the individual for the benefit of the state. We believe that the state exists for the benefit of the individual, and that's what we're fighting for. There isn't any difference between Hitler and Mussolini, the Tarquins of ancient Rome, kings of Sparta, Charles I of England and Louis XIV and Stalin. They're all just alike.
Desiring no conquest and hopeful of a ceasefire agreement with the Beiping government, United Nations forces under Lieutenant General Matthew Ridgway back up the no appeasement policy in Korea. The commanding general of the 8th Army sizes up the situation and orders the big guns into action. However, before the order to fire is given, spotter planes take off to locate enemy positions. These scenes show the teamwork between the air spotters and the ground batteries. Once the enemy is located, the information is relayed to gunners who take over. Right on the target, as usual. Looking for an all-out assault by the Reds, the UN artillery keeps right on tossing them in. Outnumbered 3-1, United Nations troops hold on doggedly and give no quarter until a peaceful plan is forthcoming. A B-36 bomber, the first of 6, returns to Fort Worth, Texas, flying non-stop from England. Completing an historic mission, their first trip to foreign soil, the huge atom bomb carriers were in the air over 30 hours. Taking off at 15-minute intervals from England, the world's biggest bombers engaged in night and day bombing exercises over the ocean on the return flight. On hand to greet the pilots and crews is General Irvine, commander of the Carswell Air Base. Well done, but how's about a shave, says the general. At Burbank, California, additional contracts for F-94 all-weather jet interceptors have boosted production at the Lockheed plant. Using radar in its nose, the speedy two-seater is already in service on both coasts, on the alert to intercept enemy bombers in darkness or bad weather. Production has been sharply accelerated since President Truman called for a 50,000 plane-a-year capacity in American plants. Big brother of the Lockheed Shooting Star, the F-94 is ready, willing, and able, a powerful guardian of our skies. Tony Galento, the former heavyweight contender, indulges in a bit of wrestling at Turner's Arena in Washington. The object of Tony's playful attention is Natey Brown, himself a one-time heavyweight hopeful. There are 2 other participants in the 4-way razzle-dazzle, Bobby Ford and Jesse James. But to return to Mr. Galento, the big question now is, which one's got the Tony? Two-ton Tony met Joe Louis, if you recall, as a boxer. We don't know which is more strenuous, boxing or wrestling, but wrestling looks more strenuous. And with another pair on hand, you've got a full house of fun and frolic. Rough on the ref. Tony is resting, but only temporarily. He's always ready for a fight. Can't stay on the outside when there's so much fun going on inside, eh, Tony? Well, it's been fun for everybody, and like all good, clean fun, it's got to end sometime. Only there's a difference of opinion between the ref and some of the boys. Well, toodaloo, fellas. Ski jumping brings out the fans for one of the big meets of the season and one of the most spectacular. Norge Hill at Fox River Grove, Illinois is the setting. The meet, the 45th International Championships, sponsored by the Norge Ski Club. Everett Carlson of Sweden is judged the winner of the Class A competition, but on the basis of complete returns, it is later given to Torbjorn Falkenger, the Norwegian champion. Yes, judges do change their minds. Spills? Yes, ma'am. Just watch. Ski jumpers seldom have a chance to take it back. Once started, they've got to go through with it, and it can be mighty rough landing. He gets the breath knocked out of him, but he'll be back jumping another day. Quadruplet calves are born to Dana and Merle Coffey of Fallon, Nevada. That is, the calves are delivered by the Coffey cow, who incidentally furnishes the cream. The Coffeys, don't misunderstand, are only the proud owners of the identical quads, divided up into 2 bull calves and 2 heifers. Oh, yes, this is Papa, a prize bit of porterhouse, but of no further interest to this family. Only 3 such sets occur in 1,000,000 births. Here's the prophetic brand. It looks like the coffee pot hit the jackpot this time. This is part of the 6,000 Canadian soldiers who recently left Seattle for the Korean battlefront. These are all volunteers, joining the United Nations forces after weeks of training at Fort Lewis, Washington. Many of these troopers of the 25th Infantry Brigade Group are veterans of World War II. They're off to join the Princess Patricia's Light Infantry, now fighting in Korea. As one officer said, we're glad to get rolling at last. The word from Toronto, where leading hairstylists from all over congregated this week, is shorter hair for you gals. And here are some of the coiffures cooked up by the experts who say so. This one's called Fantasy, by way of Paris. Also Parisian is this arrangement, especially created for cocktail parties, old-fashioned at that. The Greek-Roman influence is apparent in this design, while a spray of spring flowers is a crowning touch for this hairdo. This coiffure won first prize for its designer. Other awards were based on originality alone. For instance, we don't know what the Toronto subway has to do with shorter hair. Oh, it's over any man's head. Jamaica and the Wood Memorial, dress rehearsal for the Kentucky Derby. Number 10 is Uncle Milty, the favorite. And number 9 is Battlemorn, another ranking 3-year-old, competing in this preliminary go-round heading for Churchill Downs. The fans are set, and there they go. 13 thoroughbreds seeking first place dough of 50 grand and top billing at the Derby. They're well bunched at the first turn. The Derby's a longer race, 1.25 miles against 1.16 miles. It's number 3, Intent, who gives his backers a thrill, leading the field into the stretch. Pace setter all the way. Intent falls victim to a surge by Mrs. Nora McKell's Repertoire. A 7-to-1 shot. Repertoire catapults into racing headlines. With Uncle Milty fading badly, he may be withdrawn as a Derby contender altogether. Big names on the Louisville list are Repertoire, winner of the Wood Memorial, Intent, who finished third, and Battlemorn, nosing Intent out for place money. Hockey bows out for the season in a burst of excitement at Toronto. Here it's Maple Leafs versus Canadiens in the Stanley Cup Finals, with the Toronto Stars leading 3-1. This is the payoff. 14,000 plus hockey fans see the Montrealers draw first blood. Richards shoots it in, and the Canadiens are out front. They're a better team than they were during the regular season. Prove that when they eliminated the Red Wings in the semifinals. In the third period, with the score 2-1 against them, the Leafs fight hard to tie it up. With the Canadiens fighting just as grimly to hold on to their slim lead, this fifth game of the Cup Series is packed with thrills. With defeat only 28 seconds away, Todd Sloan of the Leafs bangs it in past goalie McNeil, and the place is bedlam. No wonder the fans are in a frenzy. Every game in the series has gone into overtime. The Maple Leafs go into this one with a vim that spells sudden death to the Canadiens. Parayko slams it in to win the game and the Stanley Cup, and his teammates promptly elect him man of the hour. Joy reigns supreme for the world's champions of hockey. Spring rains turn the Korean fighting front into a vast quagmire, through which United Nations troops slog doggedly and slowly forward to take up new positions against the expected communist drive. Patrols probe advance elements of enemy forces, constantly harassing a slowly retreating foe. Overhead, Allied planes bomb without let-up. The bombardment is directed at an estimated 800,000 Reds massed for an expected spring offensive. As the whole Korean front tenses for the attack, General Ridgway, new Far Eastern commander, arrives at the embassy in Tokyo to inspect the honor guard for the first time since he took over his new post. Known as a stickler for discipline, the new commander gives the group of picked men a minute inspection. It doesn't stop with an inspection of arms. It goes literally from head to toe. Upon General Ridgway's shoulders has been placed the vast responsibilities for a United Nations army of almost 300,000 men in Korea, plus the military government of Japan. The free world joins in returning the general's salute and wishing him well in a formidable task. Ordinary plane takeoff and landing gear is replaced by Caterpillar traction equipment. The device is demonstrated attached to a light plane, but can be adapted to any size aircraft. More efficient takeoffs, faster air speeds, and landings are claimed for this Caterpillar-equipped light plane by its pioneer, Count Bomartini of Italy. He experimented with tractor landing gears as early as 1928, but his World War II experience, where he saw airfields turned into lakes of mud, gave him the idea for a plane that carries its own runway. It's spring in Korea, too. There's been rain and the rivers are swollen, but a GI keeps dry by riding across on a tank. When these pictures were taken, UN forces were heading north across the 38th parallel. Not many hours later, the Reds launched their long-awaited spring offensive. They'd been building up to it for many months, and we'd been jabbing at them continually, keeping them off balance, shelling, probing, shelling again, stalling the commie counterblows longer than anyone anticipated. But it finally came. Nothing could stop it forever. The bugles blew at night. The screaming ranks of attackers came in human waves, regardless of losses. The 8th Army, now under General Van Fleet, rolled with the punch, gave ground slowly, pulling back to prepared defensive positions, trading real estate for lives. Spring is a bloody time in Korea, but the spirit of spring is unbowed in the hearts of these South Korean war waifs. They line up in one of the most heartwarming fashion shows of this uncertain spring season. It's clothes they're getting, nothing stylish, just clothes. No labels, no price tags. The clothes were collected by the Marine Corps League in many American cities. And don't they go over with these Korean youngsters? With help from friendly American Marines, a new dress goes over just fine. The war is a long way from their minds for a while. The British submarine Affray, built for service in the Pacific, leaves Portsmouth with 75 men aboard. A training cruise which ends in tragedy. Here is her mapped route, and here's where she made her last dive in 200 feet of water. When no surfacing report was received from the craft, search ships immediately rushed to the diving area. Vessels of 4 nations took part. 2 American destroyers joined in the Mercy operation. Also searching are other submarines, whose crews know only too well the trials of men trapped 33 fathoms deep. Aircraft sweep the skies over the disaster area, searching for clues to the mysterious disappearance. They spot a smoke marker dropped by a search plane to indicate the Affray's possible position, but time is running out. Faint underwater signals were heard, but then they too faded, as hope now fades for 75 men, martyrs to Britain's long defense of her sea frontiers. At the White House, a wishing well of forget-me-nots and a scroll are presented to Mrs. Truman by the 3 poster children of the United Cerebral Palsy May campaign. The youngsters are messengers of hope for the nation's more than 500,000 victims of the disease. $5 million are needed for research and clinics for unfortunates worthy of our help. 12 beautiful models put their best foot or feet forward in the trials to select the 1951 National Cotton Jersey Queen. It's tea for 3 at the Waldorf, and here's a daisy. Pat Patterson in a knitted number with daisy trim. And speaking of trim, Audrey Cunningham doesn't miss. Penny Balcom makes a lot of sense in this number, and it's dollars to donuts. This is mighty fittin'. Sponsored by the Knitted Fabrics Institute, these are the latest in cotton fashions. Yes, cotton has a queen, King Cotton. She is Betty Jane Marshall. Early spring thaws near Ottawa, Ontario, aided and abetted by days of spring rains, have brought record-breaking rises in water levels to the rivers in the vicinity of the Dominion capital. Some areas on the city's outskirts are already inundated, and city engineers are keeping an anxious eye on the rampaging waters and on cloudy skies that hint of more rain. Rising waters are a measure of the peril facing not only Ottawa, but other cities in Canada and in the United States, lying on the route of rain-swollen rivers. Like an unwelcome guest, a flood comes without knocking. Hundreds of families have already been evacuated from the Ottawa suburb of Gatineau, worst hit of all. It presents a grim picture of devastation. Autos, homes, everything flooded. Spring is on a rampage here. Here is Rome's welcome committee to the tourist and the traveler from foreign lands. 2,500 are picked from Rome's finest for duties as tourist police. But in reality, their main function is to see that the visitor's stay is made pleasant, comfortable, and memorable. Garbed in spotless white, they are at the service of the traveler as guides, protectors, and interpreters. They enter the Vatican to receive the papal blessing on their new duties. No language barrier need exist as long as these armbands are in evidence. The Colosseum and countless other historic points take on new meaning under their guidance. Mamselle gets a right steer, but with the best of intentions, there are a few confusing moments. The unsuspecting officers are approached by a much-traveled lady from Sweden. She wants directions, but takes no chances. There? Well, let's take a closer look. Is that it? No? Well, you take a look. Oh, you're such a nice man. Here's a boutonniere and a souvenir. Well, what do you know? Great Caesar's ghost. What a business! Supreme Allied Far East Commander Mark Clark, accompanied by the British and French ambassadors to Japan, arrives in Korea to be greeted by Field Commander General Van Fleet. They are the vanguard of dignitaries who are gathered to greet President-elect Eisenhower on his projected trip to the battle zone. Also among the group are Mrs. Van Fleet, President Rhee, and Mrs. Rhee, who join in celebrating Mrs. Van Fleet's birthday. Later, President Rhee turns over the colors to one of the many newly formed ROK divisions, who have taken on an increasing share of the defense of South Korea. These recently activated units have received high praise from General Van Fleet for their valor on crucial sectors of the battlefront. The city of Seoul prepares to roll out the red carpet for General Eisenhower, and all over town, banners of welcome are being prepared for his arrival. With all the hospitality that is being prepared for him, elaborate security measures are also being taken for the safety of the president-elect. While Seoul in festive array awaits General Ike's arrival, the government of South Korea eagerly hopes for the solution he may bring them to the grim war that is now going into its third year. In the meantime, it's Welcome Ike. One of the most tragic air crashes in recent years occurs on the outskirts of Tacoma, Washington. Making an approach to McCord Field in thick fog, the big transport carrying servicemen and their families smashes into a hill on the outskirts of the city. Of the 39 aboard, 37 perished, including 7 women and 8 children. What was to have been a gay holiday leave turned into a scene of horror. From the strewn wreckage of the plane came the pathetic evidence of children who died before they had lived. In a month, 135 persons died in service transport crashes. Grim relics of the toll taken by the fog-shrouded Northwest coast. Once again, the portals of the White House see history made as Mrs. Eisenhower, who is to be its mistress for the next 4 years, mounts its steps and graciously poses for pictures. She enters the doors of her new residence at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, Washington, D.C., for an inspection trip of her new quarters, recently renovated at a cost of $6 million and which has been appraised at $20 million. Once inside, she is confronted by the Washington Women's Press Corps, with which she will have many conferences in the days to come. Mrs. Truman takes her on a personally conducted tour of the executive mansion and fills her in on housekeeping details. Incoming and outgoing, 2 gracious first ladies. Presenting the Bark, a monster-sized amphibious cargo vehicle unveiled by the Army's Transportation Corps at Fort Lawton, Washington. The 60-ton Bark, short for Barge Amphibious Resupply Cargo, climbs ashore on 10-foot tires, the biggest size they could get. Everything about the Bark is big. It can haul ashore up to 100 tons of cargo, a far greater load than its World War II ancestor, the much smaller Duck. Each of the 4 huge tires is powered by a separate diesel engine to drive the huge vehicle easily across almost any terrain. An unusual feature lets the driver control tire pressure. On soft sand, they are slightly deflated, giving better traction. America's incoming and outgoing defense secretaries hold a press conference after confidential sessions in which Charles E. Wilson Wright, General Motors head and holder of the number 2 post in Ike's cabinet, was briefed on Pentagon affairs by Secretary Lovett. Wilson's is one of the key appointments quickly made by Eisenhower to smooth the transition between administrations, a gesture of bipartisan cooperation in these crucial times. At Fort Monmouth, Signal Corps engineers demonstrate Ray-Wind, newest meteorological warfare device. Better weather knowledge gives valuable military advantages today, and this mobile device for measuring wind direction and velocity has already proven useful both to the Signal Corps and to the Atomic Energy Commission. Carried aloft by the balloon is a small radio transmitter continually signaling weather information to the futuristic antenna on the ground. Today, Ray-Wind is released from the veil of national security. Traditional glitter and glamour unfold in Philadelphia's vast municipal stadium, scene of the Army-Navy game. The Corps of Cadets, 2,400 strong, marches on the field before a capacity crowd of 100,000 spectators. Then come the midshipmen, 3,600 of them, adding to the color of this most colorful of all football spectacles. 53rd meeting of the service teams, a rivalry that had its beginning back in 1890. Camera close-ups of the celebrities. President Truman sitting on the Navy side with daughter Margaret. Army Secretary Pace, General Irving, West Point Superintendent, and British Air Marshal Tedder. Hannibal, the Army mule, makes a grand entrance out to get the Navy's goat. But in a rugged, hard-hitting game dominated by defensive play, the underdog mule lost. In the opening period, Fred Franco, the Navy's workhorse, raced 45 yards, sparking the only sustained Navy drive of the game. The stubborn cadets stalled other midshipmen attacks, but this one clicked. From the 21, Navy's right halfback, Phil Monahan, picks up 18 yards. His stop just short of the goal line. But a few plays later, Monahan completes the distance. Navy, favored by 7 points, leads by 7 points, and that was the final outcome. Navy 7, Army nothing. 3 victories in 3 years, so it's 3 cheers for the victorious Navy team. It is a wintry morning on a remote airfield in Korea as President-elect Eisenhower arrives to fulfill a campaign pledge to inspect the battlefront at first hand. In a 3-day whirlwind tour of the rugged Korean terrain, he sees for himself the conditions under which United Nations forces are waging their struggle in sub-zero temperatures. Shuttling back and forth in light observation planes, constantly guarded by a cover of fighters, he is surrounded by a news blackout by all news agencies in one of the best-kept secrets of modern times. A carefully organized blanket of security surrounds the future president as he goes from unit to unit. Accompanying him on his tour is General Mark Clark, Supreme Commander of Allied forces in the Far East, who is welcomed by his top commanders. It is in meetings like this that General Ike is briefed on the actual fighting conditions which face United Nations troops in the seesaw struggle. General Clark, who is also making an inspection trip, is joined by his field commander, General Van Fleet. And here to make the military picture complete is General Omar Bradley, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Major John Eisenhower, now on duty in Korea, is assigned to his father as aide during the president-elect's tour of the war-torn peninsula. It's news from home for Major John. General Ike, who has advocated increasing the South Korean forces, takes particular interest in the new contingents who have proven their mettle. In the welding of an international army, the general is an experienced observer as he moves up and down the ranks of soldiers from 18 nations. And as always, he displays his interest in all soldiers, regardless of rank. It is from face-to-face meeting with the troops in the field and assessing the military situation with allied officers that he must base far-reaching decisions on America's part in the United Nations action. Time out from the fighting is taken for a full-dress review by UN units in the general's honor as he takes the salute. Here he sees the hardcore of the multinational allies who have for 2.5 years withstood the onslaughts of North Koreans and Chinese 3 times their number. Here he sees for the first time since World War II an international army of free men determined to remain free. But here's time out for chow, and General Ike sits down with GIs for some pork chops fresh from the field kitchen. And he proves that he hasn't forgotten how to snaffle the sauerkraut that goes with him. Few know better than the general the value of the morale of a fighting force on which high command decisions must be based when he confers with his military and civilian advisors on the future course of the war. Still basing his war plans on an expansion of South Korean forces, he visits a cracked division of rocks on a snow-capped ridge, where he is greeted by President Syngman Rhee. President Rhee has assured the future President of the United States that his country is eager to assume the major burden of its defense. Modernization of Korean equipment and training courses is one of the main objectives of the general's plans. The ROK soldiers have already proven themselves on Sniper Ridge, and now for the benefit of the high command, they put on an impressive exercise. After the maneuvers, General Eisenhower congratulated President Rhee on the performance of his troops. He thanks the President for the Korean flag, which will eventually be displayed in the White House, memento of an historic mission. Meanwhile, the tidings of Eisenhower's presence draw an estimated 500,000 onto the streets of Seoul. A crowded schedule prevents the president-elect from attending the demonstration, and the vast throng is naturally disappointed. But the mere fact of Ike's visit raises the hopes of this war-ravaged people for the future. At the conclusion of his fateful 3-day tour, 8th Army Headquarters is the scene of a much-anticipated press conference. 125 correspondents gather in the war room to hear his summation. As incoming Attorney General Herbert Brownell and other advisors look on, the general tells of his success in gathering first-hand information and ends with a message of hope.
As I stated publicly long before we came over here, we came over to learn. We had no panaceas, no trick ways of settling any problems. We came over here to get a grasp of the feeling in this part of the world, a look at the situation, and a better understanding of many factors that will be important to my associates and myself and to everybody here during the months to come. Much can be done, in my opinion, to improve our position. Much will be done. I think that I'm going to end this little talk with paying again a different kind of a tribute to the Korean nation. It is in terms of confidence in what I believe they can do with intelligent help given not only for their preservation, but in realization again, as I say, of that principle that freedom is an indivisible thing. I am far from a defeatist on this business because I passionately believe that freedom represents a course of life that men prefer to communism and slavery. Therefore, I believe that on this particular corner, this particular phase of this great struggle between these two ideologies, freedom is bound to be successful.
Week by week, the struggle in Indochina increases in intensity, and beleaguered French garrisons, heavily outnumbered, are supplied by air as they confront 20,000 Red Chinese and Viet Minh. The hot spot on the front is Na San, south of the Black River. Here, freshly supplied, the defenders dig in for the expected onslaught. Heavily fortified and armed bunkers are erected at key points, and for 48 hectic hours, the defenders brace themselves as the airlift continues its shuttle service. Light bombers and fighters are massed for support, and they swing into action with napalm bombs. Hundreds of Reds die under the barrage, but still they come, finally overrunning the prepared positions by sheer weight of numbers. But on the second day of the savage battle, the colonials retake the strong points, together with thousands of small arms left by the retreating guerrillas, who, in this war of attrition, leave behind them the scorched earth of one of France's richest possessions. The heavy cruiser Helena plows its way from Guam to Hawaii with President-elect Eisenhower and his new Defense Secretary, Charles E. Wilson, aboard. During the 6-day voyage, Ike and his advisors take advantage of their shipboard seclusion to map strategy of the incoming administration. In an exchange of messages with General MacArthur, he agrees to confer with the former on a plan for ending the Korean War. Embarrassing moment, nautically speaking, for the SS Yorkmar, driven aground by pounding seas near Seattle. One salvage attempt has been foiled by heavy weather, but the crew, not a man harmed by the mishap, sticks it out aboard. A Coast Guard helicopter carries a line out from shore. If the vessel threatens to break up, her complement can be removed easily. But there's no danger, say salvage experts. The ship can be refloated, given good weather and a high tide. Meanwhile, the Yorkmar is high and dry. In Buenos Aires, President Juan Perón arrives to open a special session of the Argentinian Congress. President Perón announces a second 5-year plan for his country and then outlines the major political, social, and economic reforms in the program designed to guide Argentina from 1953 to 1957. At the Alameda Naval Base, Navy camera crews get rolling on Operation Morale Lift 1952. To brighten the holidays for the boys away from home on Christmas, films of their loved ones recorded in California will be forwarded to warships at sea and shown on Christmas Day. Gigi the Clown assures that the kids will look their smiling best for Daddy, far at sea and eager for news of his loved ones. Merry Christmas wishes spanning space and time, the best possible Christmas present for a sailor serving his country far from home. Climaxing the biggest needlework contest of the year, the Grand National Champions display their prize winners at the McAlpin Hotel in New York. Miss Margaret Okahara, who was born of Japanese parents in Honolulu, shows the crocheted luncheon set which won her a free trip to New York. Miss Okahara lives in Brooklyn. A crocheted flag is one of the more fabulous items of the 3,000 pieces on display. Top man in the contest is a 51-year-old letter carrier from Portland, Oregon, Anthony White. Mrs. White taught him the needlework art, and since then, he's taken over the crocheting chores in the family. Hobby for one, career for the other, fame and fortune for both. Malta, where the 3rd Commando Brigade of the Royal Marines goes through its paces in an impressive display of assault tactics. If there's a river to be crossed, then the commandos just take it in their stride. A steep cliff is no hazard to these seasoned veterans. The Duke of Edinburgh, who recently presented new colors to the commando units on Malta, follows the progress of their precipitous descent down the rocky face of the cliff. Jolly fast, eh what? Just released films show the recent A-bomb tests in which Britain joined America and Russia as the 3rd world power to possess atomic weapons. Cast-off warships are moored near Australia's desolate Montebello Island, the target area. set up to simulate the effect of an atomic explosion in a harbor. Ashore, technicians meet a split-second schedule in setting up observation posts and control equipment. Many hundreds of miles from civilization's nearest outpost, these barren islands make an ideal test site. Today, their name is historic to Britain, the place where she showed the world that despite economic troubles, Britannia is still a first-rate military power. Reportedly, she hopes to pool the findings of the Montebello tests with still-secret U.S. data, a move desired by scientists, but difficult under present security laws. It's almost 0 hour. Technicians make last-minute adjustments on their timing instruments. Half a minute. Seconds. Observers see an unusual zigzag cloud hurled aloft, entirely different from the familiar atomic mushroom, perhaps caused by a new type of A-bomb. It is still evidence of a potent addition to the might of the free world. In Korea, 3 years of combat end as United Nations and communist negotiators at Panmunjom sign a truce. The long war, undertaken to stop red aggression, is over. The enemy holds less territory than before his troops marched, but the cost has been bitter for both sides. With fighting ended, a political conference is slated to deal with the touchy problem of unifying Korea and assuring peace. Neutral observers are already present to oversee adherence to armistice terms. And in Washington, a dramatic evening press conference at the White House sets the stage as President Eisenhower formally breaks the good news to the nation, adding his counsel against over-optimism in the face of the many problems that still lie ahead.
We have won an armistice on a single battleground, not peace in the world. We may not now relax our guard nor cease our quest. Throughout the coming months, during the period of prisoner screening and exchange, and during the possibly longer period of the political conference which looks toward the unification of Korea, we and our United Nation allies must be vigilant against the possibility of untoward developments. And as we do so, we shall fervently strive to ensure that this armistice will, in fact, bring free peoples one step nearer to their goal of a world at peace.
Solemn ceremonies on Governor's Island are a grim reminder that for many, the Korean armistice came too late. First Army Commander General Withers A. Burris presents a posthumous Silver Star Medal to the mother of Sergeant Raymond S. Taylor for his gallantry in action in Korea. Looking on are the dead soldier's father and his German fiancée, who came to America to attend the sad occasion. Holland's Air Force celebrates its 40th year with a gala air show for the Queen, and allied NATO nations send aircraft to make the occasion a roaring success. Thousands look on as a flight of jets in tight formation opens the show. The Dutch Meteor fighters are followed by Titanic US B-36s, our intercontinental atom bombers. The new Hawker Hunter puts on a hair-raising performance. Another look at the Hunter, Britain's latest. It's already surpassed the speed of sound. Bringing the curtain down, a flight of U.S. Boeing B-47s, Stratojet bombers boasting fighter plane speed. An impressive display of the free world's wings for defense on the ready in Western Europe. Midsummer madness grips the Spanish town of Pamplona 'Tis time for the folding of the bulls. Once a year on St. Firmin's Day, the young men of Pamplona lock horns with El Toro in a wild, mad dash through the streets. A bruise is a badge of honor this day, though it's not dishonorable to duck if you duck in time. Seems this fella didn't, but he's okay, and don't ask me how or why. The street is so jammed, it's hard to find room to steer clear of steer. The bull ring is reached, but the show is far from over. If you're wondering just how bull baiters manage to stay alive, go right ahead. We're wondering too. Only slight bruises, reports our local correspondent. Bones must be made of rubber here in Pamplona. This is a Spanish version of the morning hour rush on the subway, with plenty of beefing being done by all hands. On Capitol Hill, the sponsor of a bill to repeal the 20% tax on movie admissions, Noah Mason, returns to his office after passage of the bill by Congress. Ahead lies presidential signature or rejection. Congressman Mason explains what repeal of the tax will mean.
This bill, in the next 12 months, will save 5,000 theaters in the small towns and cities of our nation from closing their doors due to high cost and taxes. The removal of this tax will not threaten Treasury revenue. My studies have indicated that the Treasury will in all probability gain revenue rather than lose it by keeping the theaters open. I applaud the House and Senate leadership for their foresight in leading the way for the relief of business. I am confident that this is the first step toward restoring a sound American economy under this administration.
No chump is Jerry the chimp. He knows what to do about the weather when it waxes warm at Anaheim, California. Nobody ever told him chimpanzees were supposed to be allergic to water. Heck no. Jerry's just mad about the wet stuff, especially on a hot day. Only thing Jerry is allergic to is soap. That and pals who don't like water. Ah, there's one now. Duck, Mary. Jerry spotted you, and his ire is aroused. He can't stand ducks not taking the water. So he takes them there himself. Mary is contrary, but Jerry is quicker. They used to call her Bathless Mary, but she's bathless no longer. Jerry's gonna teach her to swim or else. Mary finally ducked out on him, so Jerry goes to the showers to cool off all over again. Yep, it's all or nothing with Jerry. First films of the ceremonies at Panmunjom that end 3 years of bitter, costly conflict. A UN honor guard is on hand at the newly built Peace Pagoda as our Chief Delegate General William K. Harrison enters. It was under Harrison's leadership that the truce negotiations came to a successful climax. But there's no sign of anything but hostility from the communist delegation on their arrival or throughout the actual ceremony. The bulky agreement spells out in minutest detail every provision of the truce, and the actual signing is a complicated affair. Each delegate present must sign his name 9 times, and each group has 5 members. The ceasefire is good news to the men at the front, but it is almost somber here. Every UN member present knows that the big problems remain to be solved, even if the enemy acts in good faith. But there is hope. A big step forward has been taken. At Munsan Base Camp, just behind the lines, UN Supreme Commander Mark Clark then affixes his signature. The armistice becomes official. The fighting is over. Prisoners will be exchanged, but there is little rejoicing. The Cold War is on, and the free world wonders, what next? The freighter SS American Inventor docks in Hamburg. Its cargo, the first installment on $15 million worth of food destined for East Germany under President Eisenhower's order to aid the stricken red satellite. It is sped to the one loophole in the Iron Curtain, Berlin, where in 3 days over 200,000 defied their communist overlords and crossed the frontier in a potent demonstration of the power of goodwill as a weapon in the Cold War. Undaunted by red threats, they wait their turn, for hours in some cases, to collect individual parcels containing 5 pounds of lard, flour, meat, beans, and peas. The distribution is done by West Germany at America's request. As one result, charges have been made that American officials attempted to hide our contributions. But the furious communist reaction leaves no doubt that every German knows from whence the food came. Many fainted in the throng, but their very presence is testimony to Germany's enduring hatred of communist oppression. The dread Pacific monsoon smites Japan with the second disaster in 4 weeks. Last month, the worst floods of the century hit Kyushu Island, killing at least 684. Now the main island, Honshu, is inundated, following a disastrous volcanic eruption that doubled the nation's woes. U.S. forces are mobilized for rescue and mercy missions. Airdrops of supplies to isolated districts mitigate the impact of nature run wild. But despite all efforts, it is a major catastrophe for Japan. Damages are incalculable, and the toll in human misery fearful, with thousands homeless or missing, and an estimated 669 dead. The camera gets a close look at a homemade armored car that outwitted Czechoslovakia's infamous frontier patrol. Vaclav Ulik, who secretly put the contraption together, tells how he and 7 others rode right past a communist border station and across the closely guarded frontier without a shot being fired. Red Guards thought it was an army vehicle until the escapees emerged in free territory only 50 yards away. Today, Ulik and his companions in the daring adventure walk in freedom, while the outfoxed guards walk a new beat somewhere in a red slave camp.
I believe that when this session of Congress is finished, and particularly when the 83rd Congress has completed its labors, it will have a very good batting average of accomplishment. And I want to say in conclusion that we have had splendid bipartisan cooperation, because in the Senate of the United States we actually don't have a Republican majority. There are 48 Republicans, 47 Democrats, and 1 independent. And without the cooperation on both sides of the aisle, of course, no legislative program would be possible. I want to say that members of Congress, regardless of their partisan affiliation, recognize that the nation is facing grave problems abroad, and we are all determined to help maintain a free world of free men.
The tiny frontier town of Joseph in northeastern Oregon pulses with excitement. It's rodeo time. Ma and Pa Kettle join in the fun, strictly for laughs right now, but even the smallest fry will tell you it's no fun to be a cowpoke on Chief Joseph days. That's today, a rootin' tootin' Wild West affair named after the old-time chief of the Nez Perce Indians. Yes, sir, it's a joltin' jamboree, a real down-to-earth thriller all the way. When a bronc gets tangled up in the chute, that's the time to bail out. This ride is short and to the point. The West is still the Wild West. Bucking bronc or beefy Brahma bull, the top riders of the range know they've been places and done things. Bully Boy goes high hat, which is no laughing matter for the clown. As often happens, it's the innocent bystander who gets the worst of the deal. an unscheduled thrill. And luckily, the cowboy gets up and walks away. Clown figures Bull is tired of it all, but it's a toss-up who's more tired. A bit of horseplay to keep actor Walter Brennan and other onlookers laughing. Smile, partner, smile. You want to be a dummy?
The nation and its capital mourn as the hearse bearing the remains of the late Senator Robert Taft arrives at the Capitol, where he will lie in state. It is in a solemn setting that the lawmaker who earned the respect of political friend and foe alike is borne into the rotunda which he had traversed for so many years. The casket is followed by his sons and their wives. A flag at half-mast symbolizes the sorrow of a nation. He lies on a catafalque, the same on which his father, President William Howard Taft, rested 23 years before. Here he is surrounded by his immediate family as dignitaries arrive to pay their last respects. Defense Secretary Charles Wilson, a close friend, is followed by President and Mrs. Eisenhower. The president loses a tower of strength in the man who so deftly steered administration legislation through Congress. More than 60,000 filed past his bier, Americans whose interest had always been his first consideration. America bids farewell to one of the great patriots of its history. Three blood-stained years end as the last round is fired in Korea. Under terms of the truce, work proceeds rapidly on the dismantling of fortifications and the removal of all weapons from the demilitarized zone. But though the guns are stilled, there are grisly reminders of the struggle. The inevitable wreckage of war strews the battered landscape as the welcome work of truce goes forward. For the first time, UN soldiers can relax in clear sight of the enemy, who is doing a little relaxing himself. The quiet is music to their ears, and even a commie knows good trumpet playing when he hears it. Maybe this is the Red Strut. All along the 125-mile front, faces are wreathed in smiles. The long days and weeks of tension are past as unit after unit moves to rear areas. This is a time when packs and equipment are lighter by pounds. The long struggle ended when UN officers entered the now historic truce building at Panmunjom, where red opposite numbers prepare to sign the truce terms, which were almost 2 years in the making. With final details ironed out, the documents are handed to UN negotiators for signature. 30 copies of each document are signed and exchanged. With the fighting over, the first and most pressing step is the exchange of prisoners, and an LST debarks a contingent of fanatic Chinese captives who in a last defiant gesture ripped their uniforms to shreds. They're followed by North Korean Reds, smartly dressed and well drilled, who march snappily to the train which will take them to the exchange point. Under terms of the truce agreement, all prisoners must be exchanged within 90 days after the signing. After running its grim course, the Korean War grinds to a halt. General Mark Clark, United Nations Far Eastern Commander, arrives in San Francisco to be received by a guard of honor made up entirely of Korean veterans. Home for the wedding of his son, General Clark also will report to President Eisenhower on the Korean situation. He warns that whatever the truce outcome, the Reds will pursue their program of world conquest. As he rides through the streets with Mayor Robinson, he receives a hero's welcome from the crowds along the line of march. To General Clark is falling the task of seeing the shooting war through to its bitter end. And with the truce an accomplished fact, he receives a well done. Dr. Milton Eisenhower, the president's younger brother and a veteran public servant, visits Buenos Aires for an interview with Argentina's President Juan Perón, a key appointment on the agenda of his 36-day fact-finding tour of Latin America. It's a most cordial reception for Dr. Eisenhower, whose mission is to build the foundation for increasingly close relations with our good neighbors below the border. Back in Washington, the White House is his first stop, where he reports to the president. While on tour, Dr. Eisenhower made no promises to our southern neighbors, but in itself, his visit was an assurance that, although concerned with world affairs, America has not forgotten this hemisphere. There's something new in the air. At Langley Field, engineers demonstrate an unorthodox flying Venetian blind, disclosing studies on new types of vertically rising aircraft by the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics. The four wing slats curved back to deflect the prop wash downwards, lifting the plane straight off the ground. Once aloft, the wings uncurve and the craft picks up forward speed. This remote-controlled model will probably never be built in full scale, but the data on stability and control problems gained here will aid engineers to design radically new vertical risers that may revolutionize flying. Square dance in the sky, helicopters on a hoedown. Army pilots from Fort Sill, Oklahoma take an old-fashioned dance and bring it up to date, filmed by Defense Department cameras. Their straw-hatted copters are the boys, and the blanket-flapping partners are the girls. Quaint copter capers. Swing your partner and dozy-do. A drum solo brings out the versatility of the flying egg beater, which has more than proved its worth in Korean skies. Well, blow the man down. One last kick, and the drum is up. So's the music, and so is the dance. And our helicopter quartet signs off with a flourish.